show. I appreciate you tuning in for another brand new review. So what's in store for you here tonight? Well, folks, like I said, it is St. Patrick's Day, and we are heading back to the Leprechaun franchise. I've talked about a couple of these installments before. We've covered the original one, and we've covered Leprechaun in the Hood. Well, now we are taking a look at the arguably most popular installment of this franchise. Tonight in movie reviews, I am talking Leprechaun 3. But let's not waste any time. If you haven't seen the trailer for Leprechaun 3 before, this tells the story of young Scott McCoy, a college student passing through Vegas who stops to help a broken down motorist Tammy get to her job at the Lucky Shamrock Casino. After gambling away all of his tuition money, Scott stumbles upon a gold coin owned by Lubden the Leprechaun. And unfortunately for him, if he doesn't get that gold coin back, he'll find out that his luck is going to run out. And there it is, folks. That is Leprechaun 3. Now, here's the thing. In comparison to all of our other favorite horror franchises of the 70s, 80s, 90s, and current day, Leprechaun holds the distinguishment of being one of the only franchises to where the continuity is not carried from one film over to the next. All of our other favorites, there is continuity no matter how loose it is. Doesn't matter whether it's Halloween and we have like the 4 or 5 different timelines in that. If it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre to where every sequel is like a direct sequel to the first film as opposed to being a sequel to the prior film. Scream, Child's Play, whatever the case is, all these other franchises have had continuity held up no matter how long they've been going on. But in the case of Leprechaun, with the exception of the reboot we got about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more, Leprechaun Origins, all these films have had their own separate continuity to it. Like nothing really erases or causes any kind of issues with events that have happened in the prior films at all, but there's nothing or there's no returning characters outside of the Leprechaun or any plot lines that are being picked up from one movie to the next. That makes it super, super accessible because you don't need to know the backstory about any of this to get into it. I think most people have probably seen the original Leprechaun because I've talked about it on this show before. There was a long period of time to where that movie was just scattered across the internet completely for free. For those y'all that remember Real Player back in the day, you might remember in the late 90s, this is one of the very few free films that you could find on Real Player to just load up and watch online all the time. And this is before the heyday of really, really watching movies on the internet. So that was a big, big thing. With Leprechaun 3, everything is transported over to Vegas. Those first 2 films really made it a small town kind of story, honestly. Things didn't seem larger than life, but it only makes sense that with a character like this, who is just fantastical and very much in the fantasy realm, that they were gonna have to get the Leprechaun somewhere else to take advantage of the over-the-topness of this franchise. It's not so much in the realm of like Nightmare on Elm Street, like to where they have to expand things, because with that, they have the dream space. They don't need to worry about like giving Freddy Krueger a larger play space, because in the dream space, there's infinite space for you to go and you can do anything that you want to. But in a series like Leprechaun, putting it in Las Vegas actually gives a little bit more for our hero. But putting it in Vegas gives Warwick Davis just a little bit more to do as Lubden the Leprechaun, because he's still his normal murderous, angry self, going after anybody who happens to get their hands on his pot of gold or even a single shilling. But at the same time, we get to see that Lubden, just like all the other characters, is also entranced by everything that Vegas has to offer, whether it's the gambling, the Elvis impersonators, the women. It doesn't matter what it is, we see that he's susceptible to the same exact perils, the same vices that all of us are as well. And that made it a lot of fun, just because sometimes you want to be able to maybe not necessarily humanize these characters, but find some relatable ground to them. And what better relatable ground is there than the vices of Las Vegas? Now, in terms of mythology for this particular entry in the franchise, there's been other things we've set up, like in the previous film was about the Leprechaun finding a bride. And the rule here basically that he had to marry a descendant of a servant of his in that film. Or in the first film, when they're talking about the four-leaf clovers and the powers that that has over the leprechaun as well, most of that isn't acknowledged. So it's not a case of they say anything that says that those things aren't still in place. It's just not really the focus here of this film. You know, the movie really starts off with a vagrant bringing the leprechaun in stone form with this medallion around him to this pawn shop in Vegas to basically just get him off of his hands. And it being a pawn shop and the way that these characters are portrayed in horror films especially, we know what's going to happen. Obviously, the pawn shop owner takes off the medallion and frees Lubden and finds out about the pot of gold and starts this little mini battle between the two of them and who's going to gain ownership of it. And I will say, looking back and watching this again, that is still the one plot point that I do wish would have played out throughout the entire film. You know, Leprechaun in the Hood, which, love it or hate it, had this really good storyline to where it wasn't just about Lubden being the bad guy, but Ice-T's character was also the main, like the secondary villain of the film, because he's trying to get this golden flute back. So the lead characters are having to watch out for him just as much as they are with the leprechaun. And I don't think I'm alone in thinking that it kind of would have made sense that the pawn shop owner would have played a little bit of a bigger role in this, whether he's working hand in hand with the leprechaun for his promise of riches, not the gold of the leprechaun, but using that wish and the luck from the coins to get all the money that he desires, which eventually would lead to the leprechaun betraying him, of course. But I just feel that that was a chance to introduce that secondary character, Gupta, I believe is the character's name, as the secondary villain of the film, because there's no reason to think that he wouldn't be so quick to screw over our lead character Scott or his love interest Tammy in this one either. So I do feel that was a missed opportunity, but there's so much else to really enjoy about this film. You know, we don't skip out on any of the gore in this. The leprechaun has always been a very brutal, mean killer who very much punishes anybody who crosses his path in a negative way. And so that's still very much on here. The final death of the film itself that involves a magician that ended up with the leprechauns, one of the leprechauns shilling, is one of the best in the franchise, just because of the fact that it shows how unhinged the leprechaun is and that people are really diffused by that appearance until blood and guts start showing up. I thought that was excellent, honestly. And it leads to one of the better pieces of mythology that they have in this franchise, which is anybody that gets a hold of the leprechaun's gold, whether it's the whole thing or just a shilling, they get a free wish that's guided by the magic. And I enjoyed that because we obviously get to see a number of people's desires throughout the film. That's the focus here of this entry. We get to see Scott wish to go back on a hot streak and basically win all the money back they lost for his tuition. The owner of the casino wishes to hook up with Scott's love interest Tammy, and that gets very close to happening. Loretta, who works with our magician and runs one of the tables in the casino, played by horror alum from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Caroline Williams, wishes to have the body that she had when she was younger. All these things go down, and it very much plays up this one particular aspect of this mythology. Now, again, the downside is that when we get to these latter entries after this one, it's another like plot point that just doesn't get picked up. Like technically, you could say that Leprechaun in the Hood does follow that up because the whole idea is with that golden flute, they can make anybody enjoy the music that they're playing. So you could say that's technically a wish, but it just stands out as one of the things from the Leprechaun franchise that they wish they did better. Continuity sometimes really does help out with certain aspects being held over, and there's a lot of good in Leprechaun 3 that I feel should have carried over to it, including the fact that our lead character Scott, played by John Gaddens, is turned into a leprechaun in this one. There's a new piece of mythology introduced to where during a fight scene that he has with Lubden, that Lubden bites him and gets some of his blood into Scott's wound, and Scott spends the rest of the movie turning into a leprechaun himself, which again, another plot point that could have been explored later on in the franchise, because there is a lot of hinting here that two leprechauns together is no good and it would always lead to doom. There can only be one, kind of like a whole Sith thing. You know, there's always the rule of two, but that apprentice is always going to usurp the master. it would not be crazy to have gotten a Leprechaun entry to where it's Leprechaun versus Leprechaun. And we only get a little bit of it here. And the fact that Scott is still very much the hero of this story means that we don't really get a true Leprechaun battle like you would probably expect. But there's a lot of fun in this one. It's just as crass as you're used to the Leprechaun series being. Again, plenty of great creative depths in this one as well, too. But let's be honest here. Outside of the original film, and in my opinion, Leprechaun in the Hood, the characters here just are not that deep and memorable. That's no offense at all to the actors who are portraying them, but they're not the draw of the grand majority of these films, and they're not the draw in this one as well either. Either way, Leprechaun 3 is absolutely a classic. It is not my favorite in the franchise, but I'm very curious if this one does lie on the top of all of your lists when you get around to the St. Patrick's holiday. So, folks, tell me in the comment section here what your favorite Leprechaun is. Are you digging what I'm saying about some of these plot points, about Gupta potentially being the secondary antagonist, or us hopefully at one point getting a movie with a Leprechaun versus a Leprechaun? Let me know that because I'm curious about your thoughts there on it. But you're going to want to get subscribed to stay on top of all the great content I have coming for y'all here very soon. You can get subscribed at my link tree at linktr.ee/t-scary-movie. If you get subscribed, that's going to give you access to my YouTube page for all the video versions of the show, your favorite podcasting platforms for the audio-only versions of the show, to my Letterboxd page for written reviews and movie rankings throughout the year, to my TikTok page for my short horror content, including movie news and movie premieres and full episodes, and to my Twitch page for horror gaming, and my Fangoria shop page for a 20% discount off anything in the Fangoria shop. Take advantage of all that, folks. Hit that subscribe button no matter where you are watching. I got more great horror content coming out your way, including reviews for The Parenting, the last couple episodes of season 2 of Mayfair Witches. We're jumping back into The Howling very soon as well, too. Y'all, we got so much great stuff for you to check out. Don't want you to miss any of that. But that's it tonight, folks. I appreciate you tuning in. My name is T. We'll be talking scary movies. Stay scared.